The deposition room is cold, not uncomfortable cold, deliberately cold, the kind of temperature that law firms dial in because they know it keeps people sharp, keeps people honest, keeps people from getting comfortable enough to lie convincingly. The air tastes like recycled oxygen and old money. The table is 12 feet of lacquered walnut, and at one end of it sits Marcus Hale, CEO of Vantara Capital Group, a man who has spent the better part of 2 decades convincing rooms full of people that he is the smartest person in any space he inhabits. He is wearing a navy suit that costs more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. His cufflinks are brushed platinum. His hair is silver at the temples in the way that men like Marcus engineer silver temples, because it signals authority without suggesting age. He has a glass of water in front of him, untouched because Marcus Hale does not get thirsty. Marcus Hale does not sweat. Marcus Hale does not blink first. Across the table from him sits a woman named Elise Navarro. She is 34 years old. She is wearing a grey blazer and a white blouse, and she has a legal pad in front of her, but she is not writing on it. She does not need to write on it. Everything she needs is already inside a sealed manila envelope that sits at the center of the table, equidistant between them, like a grenade with the pin already pulled. Elise does not say anything. She simply slides the envelope down the table toward Marcus's water glass. The sound it makes, that slow paper against lacquer drag, is the loudest thing in the room. Marcus Hale looks at the envelope. He looks at Elise. He allows himself a small smile, the kind of smile that is designed to communicate that he has seen every trick in every book, that he has been in rooms like this before, that men far more dangerous than Elise Navarro have tried to hand him envelopes and walked away empty. "I don't need to open that," he says. Elise says, "Open it." He does. And the color leaves his face the way water drains from a bathtub, all at once, suddenly, and with a sound you can almost hear. To understand how a man who controlled $430 million in investor capital lost everything in the 60 seconds it took to open that envelope, we have to go back. Not years back, not even a decade. We go back 14 months to a Tuesday morning in March, to a glass-walled corner office on the 38th floor of the Vantara Capital Tower, where a forensic data analyst named Elise Navarro walked in to deliver a routine internal compliance report and walked out without a job. 14 months earlier, Vantara Capital Group is a firm in bloom. The Bloomberg mentions are multiplying. The fund prospectuses are gleaming. The investor dinners are moving to better restaurants. Marcus Hale has positioned Vantara as the steward of what he calls patient capital, long horizon funds designed for institutional investors, family offices, and high net worth individuals who want their money working quietly, steadily, without drama. The pitch is elegant, the branding is meticulous, the returns, at least on paper, are exactly what you would expect from a firm run by a man with Marcus Hale's background, his MBA from Wharton, his 15 years at 2 white shoe investment banks, his reputation as a man who reads every balance sheet twice before breakfast. Elise Navarro has been at Vantara for 2 years when she notices the first discrepancy. She is not looking for it. She is running a quarterly reconciliation on the Meridian Growth Fund, a mid-tier vehicle carrying $62 million from a consortium of regional pension administrators, and she finds a line item that does not match. A management fee withdrawal, routine on its face, that corresponds to no invoice in the accounts payable system, that routes to a holding entity she has never seen before, a Delaware shell called Orbis Advisory Partners LLC, that appears in the Vantara records exactly twice, once when the money goes out, and once in a registration document that lists its sole member as a trust she cannot trace without a court order. She flags it internally. She writes a memo. She sends it to the chief compliance officer, a man named Roland Fitch, who has been at Vantara for 11 years and who has the office directly adjacent to Marcus Hales. Roland reads the memo. He calls Elise in. He tells her she is misreading the structure, that Orbis is a legitimate service provider under a confidentiality arrangement, that the fee is authorized, that she should delete her copy of the memo and move on. She does not delete her copy. She sends a follow-up. She finds 3 more instances of similar withdrawals across 2 other Vantara funds, the Apex Preservation Fund carrying 89 million and the Crestline Income Portfolio carrying 41 million. The pattern is not random. The amounts are always just below the threshold that would trigger automatic regulatory scrutiny. Always withdrawn in the same quarterly window, always routed through Orbis, always documented in a way that is technically present but practically invisible, buried in footnotes, labeled with generic fee codes, cross-referenced to documents that exist only in a subsection of the internal filing system that requires administrator-level credentials to access. Elise requests those credentials from the IT department. She is told her access level does not permit them. She escalates the request through compliance channels. 3 days pass. On the 4th day, she arrives at her workstation and finds that her access to the Meridian Fund records she has been working with for 2 years, has been quietly revoked. That afternoon, she is called to Marcus Hale's office. The office is theatrical in the way that only deeply insecure power arranges itself. The desk is the size of a small stage. The view behind Marcus is the full Manhattan skyline, which means that anyone sitting across from him is always squinting slightly into the light, always at a slight visual disadvantage. The walls carry the expected artifacts of Marcus's mythology: the framed magazine covers, the photos with senators, the shadow box containing a first edition copy of a market strategy document he published in 2009, which he once described in an interview as the paper that called the bottom of the crisis. He does not stand when Elise enters. He does not offer her a seat. He lets her stand in the middle of the room for a moment before gesturing, minimally, toward the chair across from him. "I've reviewed your escalations," Marcus says. He says it the way you would say, "I've reviewed your crayon drawings." The dismissal is absolute, architectural. "I want to have a direct conversation with you because I think you're a talented analyst who has gotten herself turned around." Elise says, "The fee withdrawals don't match the authorized schedule. The receiving entity is undisclosed in the investor prospectuses. That's a material omission under." Elise, he says her name like a period. "We have outside counsel. We have a compliance function. We have an audit committee." These structures exist precisely so that individual analysts don't go building conspiracy theories out of accounting line, items they don't have the full context to interpret. "I'm asking for the context," she says. "I'm asking for access to the documentation that would explain it. And I'm telling you that access is restricted for very good legal reasons that have nothing to do with what you're imagining." He folds his hands on the desk. "I'm going to be honest with you. The questions you're asking, the memos you've been circulating, it creates an atmosphere of internal suspicion that is genuinely damaging to the firm. It damages morale. It distracts from actual work. And frankly, it makes me question your judgment." She meets his eyes. "Are you terminating me?" "I'm giving you the opportunity to recalibrate," he says, "to step back from a line of inquiry that is based on a misreading of very complex, very legitimately structured financial arrangements. If you can do that, there's no reason this conversation ever happened. If you can't." He spreads his hands. The gesture says, "The door is right there." "I'd like to request a formal whistleblower review under Elise." He says her name again. Same tone, same period. He reaches under his desk and produces a manila envelope, a different envelope, a smaller one, and slides it across the desk. Ha has prepared a separation agreement. It's generous. It includes a standard NDA. I would encourage you to review it with your own counsel. She looks at the envelope. She looks at Marcus. He has already looked away from her, already returned his attention to something on his screen, already erased her from the room. You don't have proof of anything, he says, without looking up. You have an anomaly and an overactive imagination. Take the agreement, Elise. Just leave my office. She picks up the envelope. She stands. She walks to the door. She does not sign the NDA. What Marcus Hale does not know, what he cannot know, because he underestimated her so completely that he never considered the possibility, is that 3 weeks before this conversation, before her access was revoked, before the separation agreement was prepared, Elise Navarro did something very quiet and very deliberate. She had been in the system. She had been inside the fund management platform, running her reconciliation, and she had noticed that certain records were being modified. Not deleted, not yet, modified. Timestamps adjusted, descriptions altered. She had noticed because the platform's audit trail, the embedded log that records every user action inside the system, had shown her the changes in real time. She could see in the system's own language that someone with administrator credentials was reaching backward into the records and smoothing them out. She had taken screenshots, not of the records themselves. She had understood even then that the records were being changed, and that by the time anyone looked they would read cleanly. She had taken screenshots of the audit trail itself, of the log entries showing the modifications, of the timestamps, of the administrator credential codes attached to each change. She had emailed them to a personal account. A single email sent from her workstation to an address that Marcus Hale did not know existed, through a client she had accessed on her personal phone, on a network separate from Vantara's. And then she had cleared the browser history. And then she had gone home, and she had waited. Now she is waiting with purpose. But she has also understood something that changes the shape of everything. The screenshots are useful. The screenshots are a starting point, but they are not the audit trail itself. They are a picture of a window. They prove the window existed, but they do not prove what was visible through it. For a case built on financial fraud, on intentional record manipulation, on the systematic concealment of investor fund diversion, a picture of a window is not enough. She needs the window. And 3 days after leaving Vantara Capital's offices for the last time, Elise Navarro makes a phone call to a firm she has researched carefully over the preceding 2 weeks. A digital forensics practice called Meridian Data Integrity, no relation to the fund, run by a man named Daniel Cho, a former NSA contractor who now spends his professional life doing legally admissible reconstruction of deleted and modified digital records for litigation support. His firm has testified in 11 SEC enforcement actions. He has a reputation, in the circles that know his name, for being the person you call when you need to prove that something that no longer exists once existed. She explains what she has. She explains what she needs. He listens for 40 minutes without interrupting. If they modified the audit trail inside the fund management platform, he says, they didn't actually delete it. They can't. The platform writes to a shadow log. Most administrators don't even know it's there. It's a compliance requirement baked into the platform's architecture by the developer. Every action gets written to a secondary database that isn't accessible through the normal interface. It requires a forensic extraction, but it's there. They locked down system access, Elise says. I can't get inside the platform. You don't have to, Cho says. They do. She asks what he means. He tells her that the shadow log is not stored on Vantara's servers. It is stored on the platform vendor's infrastructure, as part of the service architecture. Vantara does not own it. Vantara cannot modify it. Vantara cannot delete it. and under the platform's standard service agreement, an agreement that Vantara signed when they licensed the software, the vendor is required to produce those logs in response to a valid legal request. There is a silence on the line. So the audit trail they thought they erased, Elise says slowly, is sitting on a server they don't control. Intact, Cho says, time spent, attributed to specific user credential IDs. Waiting. What follows is not fast. There is nothing cinematic about what Elise does next. There are no montages. There is no dramatic music. There is a small apartment in Brooklyn and a laptop and 6 weeks of methodical, painstaking reconstruction work. And there is a forensic specialist who charges $800 an hour and who is worth every cent. And there is an attorney named Patricia Wren who has spent 20 years working whistleblower and securities fraud cases, and who, when Elise lays the screenshots in front of her, looks at them for a long time and then looks up and says, "Tell me everything from the beginning." Patricia files a preservation notice. It goes to the fund management platform's legal department, requesting that all server logs, shadow audit trails, and access records related to the Vantara Capital Group accounts be preserved immediately pending litigation. The platform vendor's in-house counsel, who has no stake in Vantara's fortunes and every stake in not being implicated in a cover-up, complies within 24 hours. Daniel Cho begins the extraction. The shadow logs are dense, 14 months of records covering all 3 funds, every login, every record modification, every field change, every time-stamped adjustment, every deletion request. He builds a reconstruction timeline that is 53 pages long, and at its center is a finding so clean and so damning that even Cho, who has seen everything, pauses before he says it out loud. The administrator credential that performed the majority of the record modifications, the credential that reached back into the fund records and changed fee descriptions, altered routing classifications, scrubbed the Orbis entity references from internal memos. That credential belongs to a user account registered in the platform under the name of Roland Fitch, Chief Compliance Officer, registered to his employee ID, logged in from his office workstation, on dates and at times that correspond precisely to the periods following Elise's internal escalations. But Roland Fitch is not acting alone, because the shadow log also captures something else: the approval chain. Every administrator action in the platform, by design, requires a secondary authorization from a supervising credential, a check on the check. Every modification that Roland made was countersigned in the system's own record by a second administrator account. The second account is registered under a name Elise does not immediately recognize. An executive account created 18 months ago, active only during the modification windows, dormant otherwise. She asks Cho to run the account's device signature against Vantara's IT registration records. It takes him 4 hours. The device signature matches a MacBook Pro registered to the Vantara corporate fleet. Asset tag 774. Assigned user Marcus Hale. He knew. He was not merely the beneficiary, he was the co-architect. Every deletion, every modification, every relabeling of the Orbis withdrawals as legitimate service fees. Marcus Hale personally countersigned each one from his own device, with his own credentials, leaving a chain of evidence in a database he did not know existed. Patricia files the discovery motion 8 weeks after Elise's initial call. The subpoena goes to the platform vendor for the full log extraction. Simultaneously, she files an anonymous tip with the SEC's Office of the Whistleblower, attaching the screenshots, the reconstruction timeline, Cho's 53-page forensic report, and a financial analysis showing that across 4 years of the scheme, Orbis Advisory Partners LLC received $11.2 million in undisclosed withdrawals from 3 investor funds, money that moved through Orbis and then through 2 additional shell layers before landing in accounts that Patricia's financial investigator traces, partially but convincingly, to a Cayman Islands trust, whose beneficial owner documentation has been subpoenaed. The SEC opens a formal investigation within 6 days of receiving the tip. They do not announce it, they do not have to. Patricia receives confirmation through channels. Elise learns about it on a Wednesday afternoon, sitting at her kitchen table, and she closes her laptop and she makes herself a cup of coffee and she sits with it for a long time, not celebrating, not feeling anything in particular except a very deep and very steady certainty that the next step will work, because Vantara's institutional investors, the pension administrators, the family offices, the endowments, receive quarterly reports. Those reports contain performance data and fee disclosures, and Elise, working with Patricia's team, has identified a specific provision in the limited partnership agreements governing 2 of the 3 funds, a provision that requires any investor holding more than 5% of a fund's capital to receive immediate written notice in the event that the fund becomes the subject of a formal regulatory inquiry. The provision is buried in Schedule C of the agreements. Vantara's own lawyers wrote it. The inquiry has now been opened. The notice has not been sent. Patricia sends a formal written demand to Vantara's outside counsel requiring immediate compliance with Schedule C. The demand arrives on a Thursday. By Friday afternoon, Vantara's counsel has called 3 times. By Monday morning, 2 of the pension fund administrators, one representing school district employees in Ohio, one representing municipal workers in New Jersey, have retained their own counsel and are demanding a meeting. Marcus Hale is now in 4 places at once, managing the SEC inquiry, fielding calls from panicked institutional investors, running damage control through a PR firm he has brought in on a confidential basis, and trying to understand how any of this is possible when he watched Roland Fitch systematically clean the records. He asks his general counsel, behind closed doors, to explain how the logs could have survived. His general counsel explains about the shadow database, about the platform's compliance architecture, about the preservation notice that arrived before anyone at Vantara knew to look, about the fact that once the preservation notice was filed, every record became legally protected. Every deletion attempt became its own evidence of obstruction. Marcus sits with this information for a long time. Then he asks his counsel how bad it is. His counsel does not answer immediately. That silence is its own answer. The deposition is scheduled for 6 weeks after the SEC inquiry opens. Marcus arrives with 2 attorneys and a crisis PR consultant who waits in the lobby. He is dressed precisely as described. He is radiating the particular energy of a man who has convinced himself that he can still find the edge of this, can still locate the angle, can still deploy the combination of confidence and condescension that has always found him the door marked exit. He has survived investigations before, smaller ones, regulatory inquiries that resolved quietly, that cost fees and required some restructuring, but never cost him anything that actually mattered. He believes this is that kind of situation. He has told himself, firmly and repeatedly, that it is that kind of situation. Patricia Wren is already seated when he enters. Elise Navarro is beside her. 2 SEC staff attorneys are present, along with a court reporter and Daniel Cho, who sits to the side with a laptop and 2 external drives, and the calm demeanor of a man who has already won and is simply here to watch the paperwork confirm it. There is a representative from the platform vendor's legal team, present pursuant to the subpoena, ready to authenticate the log records. Marcus takes his seat. He looks at Elise. The look contains, briefly, surprise, genuine surprise, the kind he cannot fully control. And then the smile moves back into place. He has not seen her since the day he handed her the separation agreement. He did not expect to see her across a deposition table. The surprise is information. Elise notes it. Cho notes it. Patricia, who has prepared for this moment across 6 weeks of 16-hour days, notes it with the specific quality of attention that means she is already thinking 3 questions ahead. The envelope's a bubble. Marcus opens it. Inside are 47 pages. The first page is a cover sheet with a case number and the SEC seal. The second page is a reproduction of the shadow log extract covering March through June of the previous year, the period during which the record modifications occurred. The entries are highlighted in 3 colors: red for deletion requests, yellow for field modifications, blue for administrator counter-signatures. The page is almost entirely covered in blue. Each blue line corresponds to Marcus Hale's credential. Each blue line carries a timestamp, a device signature, a specific action code, and the exact content of the modification it authorized. The records are not Elise's screenshots. They are not reconstructions. They are the primary source data, extracted from the platform's infrastructure, authenticated by the vendor's own representative, formatted in the platform's native output and certified as unmodified. They show, in the platform's own language, that Marcus Hale personally authorized the modification or deletion of 412 distinct records across 3 investor funds over a period of 9 months. They show the before state of each record, what it said before the modification, and the after state, what it said once the modification was saved. The before states show clear references to Orbis Advisory Partners, LLC, to unauthorized fee withdrawals, to transfer routing instructions that match the Cayman accounts now under subpoena. The after states show clean, generic, compliant-looking entries. They show the full architecture of the cover-up, in the cover-up's own handwriting. Marcus Hale looks at the pages. He does not say anything. The color has left his face. The smile is gone, not dimmed, not reduced, but gone completely. The way a signal disappears when you move out of range. His right hand, which is resting on the table, has stilled entirely. He is a man who has just understood something that cannot be ununderstood. Patricia Wren opens her own folder. "Mr. Hale," she says, and her voice is even, professional, entirely without drama. "I'd like to begin by asking you about the administrator credential registered under your name and employee ID in the Vantara Capital account on the Meridian Fund Management platform. Specifically, I'd like to ask you about 412 counter-authorization events recorded in the platform's shadow audit database between March and December of the preceding fiscal year. We have the platform vendor's representative here to authenticate these records. We also have Mr. Cho, whose reconstruction timeline has been submitted to the SEC as Exhibit C in the formal inquiry. Before I ask my first question, I want to give you the opportunity to consult with your counsel." Marcus looks at his attorney. His attorney leans in and murmurs something. Marcus does not seem to hear it. He is still looking at the pages, at the blue lines, at the timestamps, at his own name, repeated 412 times in the system's cold and perfect memory. He thought he had deleted the evidence. He had deleted it from the only database he knew existed. The database he didn't know existed had been preserving it, silently, on a server his own credentials could not reach, in a log his own administrators could not modify, accumulating across 9 months into something that now sits on a lacquered walnut table in front of him, and constitutes the most complete and legally airtight financial fraud record that Patricia Wren, in 20 years of this work, has ever seen walk into a deposition room. Elise Navarro does not look at Marcus Hale. She looks at her legal pad. She uncaps her pen. She writes one thing on the pad, not a note, not a question, not anything that matters to anyone in the room except herself. She writes the date she was walked out of the 38th floor office. The date she was handed a separation agreement and told she didn't have proof and told to just leave. And then she caps the pen and she puts it down and she sits very still with the particular stillness of a person who has done exactly what they set out to do. And she lets the silence in the room do the rest. The deposition lasts 6 hours. Marcus Hale exercises his Fifth Amendment right 119 times. His co-signature on 412 fraudulent record modifications is entered into the SEC evidentiary record. The platform vendor authenticates the logs. Cho testifies for 2.5 hours about the reconstruction methodology and the chain of custody for every piece of digital evidence. Patricia introduces the Cayman Trust subpoena results, which have partially resolved by this point, and which trace $3.8 million of the $11 million in Orbis withdrawals to accounts beneficially owned by a holding entity connected to a trust, whose grantor is Marcus Hale's wife's maiden name family trust, a structure created 7 years ago, a year before Vantara launched the Meridian Fund. The SCE issues a formal enforcement action 11 days later. Trading is halted in Vantara Capital's publicly registered vehicles. The firm's bank accounts are frozen, pending the full investigation. The institutional investors file civil suits. The pension administrators, the ones representing the school teachers and the municipal workers, file a joint action seeking recovery of all diverted funds plus damages. Roland Fitch, who has been separately deposed, cooperates with investigators in exchange for a reduced disposition agreement and provides testimony confirming that the instruction to modify the records came directly from Marcus Hale, delivered verbally in the 38th floor office on a Sunday afternoon, 3 days after Elise Navarro sent her first internal escalation memo. Marcus Hale is formally barred by the SEC from serving as an officer or director of any registered investment firm. His personal assets, to the extent traceable to the scheme, are subject to disgorgement. His attorneys negotiate. The numbers are large. The negotiations are not quick. The Orbis entity is dissolved. The Cayman Trust is under ongoing investigation by both the SEC and, through a mutual legal assistance treaty, by the relevant foreign jurisdiction. The full recovery of the $11 million is not guaranteed and may take years. The civil suits will outlast this story by a considerable margin. Elise Navarro receives a Whistleblower Award from the SEC's Office of the Whistleblower. The award is a percentage of the penalties collected. The number is material. She does not discuss it publicly. She has moved on to a senior forensic compliance role at a firm that does regulatory investigation work, a role she was offered before the deposition. Based on the quality and thoroughness of the evidence package she had assembled, because Patricia Wren, who has seen every kind of complainant walk through her door, told the firm's managing partner that Elise was the most methodical and disciplined non-attorney investigator she had ever worked with. Daniel Cho adds the case to his firm's credentials page. The entry is brief. Financial sector audit trail reconstruction, SEC enforcement action, multi-million-dollar recovery. He does not use anyone's names. He does not need to. There is one detail that stays with Elise. Not the award, not the enforcement action, not the photographs that run in the financial press when the news becomes public. One detail. It is this. When Marcus Hale was modifying those 412 records, when he was reaching backward into the system and smoothing out the evidence of what he had done, the platform's own architecture was watching him. The shadow log was running in the background of every session, silent and faithful, writing down everything he was trying to erase, storing it on a server he did not own, in a database he did not know existed, behind a preservation wall that went up the moment Elise's attorney filed a single legal notice. He erased the evidence. The system wrote it back down. Every keystroke, Every authorization, every timestamp, every change from what was true to what he needed people to believe. 412 times. In a database designed precisely for the purpose of catching exactly what he was doing, Marcus Hale signed his own name to the thing he was trying to hide. The audit trail, the one he ordered deleted, the one that should not have existed, the one he dismissed as impossible when his counsel explained it to him. That audit trail is what put him in the deposition room. That audit trail is what put his name on the SEC order. That audit trail is what brought Elise Navarro, composed and unhurried and completely without sentiment, to the other end of a 12-foot walnut table on a cold morning with a sealed envelope and the patience to wait while he opened it. She told him she had concerns. He told her she had an overactive imagination. She told him the records didn't match. He told her she was misreading the structure. She told him she wanted to understand the documentation. He told her to leave his office. She left his office. She just didn't leave the evidence behind. The final audit. Every number tells a story. Every deleted file leaves a ghost. Subscribe.